Being 5 o'clock, I'll call the meeting of the Finance and Property Committee to order on Tuesday, November 4th, 2014. My name is James Stack. I am the chairman of the committee. To my right is Terry Dolan, the member. Our other member, Chad Burrell, is excused this evening. Item number 2, a request from Police Chief Kurt Hoyer for approval to apply for DOT BOTS High Visibility Corridor Enforcement Grant. Chief?
Okay, thank you. Sneak up here real quick, answer any questions. This is actually the second year in a row that we've come before this committee and council to take part in this particular grant. The grant is actually held by Wood County and the Wood County Sheriff's Department. They make application for the grant through Department of Transportation, Bureau of Traffic Safety, and one of the components is that we as a municipality and Marshall's municipality also have to join in the enforcement effort. So it is called a high visibility corridor grant, and the concept would be during a time frame, we'd use State Highway 13 as an example. We would patrol areas of State Highway 13 within our jurisdiction, the county theirs, and Marshfield theirs, creating visibility, high visibility with law enforcement, addressing any traffic violations, and also sending them a message to other drivers on the road, you know, abide by the rules of the road, buckle up, speed limit, etc. Our responsibility is to match at 20, I believe 25% in kind, and how we always are able to accomplish that in these types of grants is when our shifts have above minimum manning and the grant period is operating, we just put an individual that's on the current, you know, hourly payroll at that time into that mix and count those hours. Anybody else that's working that has signed up is covered at overtime rate by the grant proceeds.
Okay. And when you say overtime, what does that mean? You know, we have a certain level of overtime built into our expenses, then.
This would be external to that. That would sit in the grant fund. Those funds would come out of the grant fund that the Sheriff's Department would have and administer. So we would provide paperwork to their director of that grant, and that's done by Sergeant Lee Garrels.
Right.
We submit the paperwork to him, they submit it to the county cuts the check back.
Okay. All right. And when will this take place? Or is it?
I'm waiting for final information from Sergeant Garrels, so it's going to probably be in this month and then probably through the holiday season. And perhaps in the next year, I'll have those details as soon as he finishes and gets back the paperwork from DOT and BOTS.
Okay, and have you, this second, third time?
Second year in a row for this particular grant. We've had other grant efforts through Department of Transportation, Bureau of Traffic Safety as well.
Okay. All right, questions from anyone? Comments? I'd make a motion to approve the Chief's request for approval to apply for the DOTS High Visibility Corridor Enforcement Grant.
Second.
Motion has been made, second, to approve the request. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion passes. Thank you,
very
Chief,
much.
for coming in. Item number 3 is to review and consider a request to approve a resolution designating American Deposit Management Company as a public depository. And Tim, this will be yours.
Chase Dave Batten, but he's unable to be here.
Right.
Basically, they think he sent you all the background information on this. He just wants a resolution to add this as a depository for the city.
All
And
right.
basically that enables us to, especially at tax collection time when we have a lot of cash on hand, to transfer that to the American Depository, and then they can distribute it amongst other financial institutions, thus we kind of keep our funds protected from a FDIC insurance standpoint.
Okay. Any, sir, are you with them or?
No.
From Water Heights.
Oh, yes, I knew I was.
It's the best dressed guy in the room though.
That's probably why you didn't recognize him.
No. He and I talked a few months ago, I apologize. And I did read through that, and I thought that was interesting that, and this as a depository becomes similar to what we have for our other
Yeah,
banks
like
that we
we,
work with.
yeah, we have the
So-
local government investment pool, we've had we've belonged to other pools, some of those have dissolved since then with the low interest rate environment, but this would just be adding another option for us to deposit our funds in.
And pay a little bit more interest perhaps back to the city for that. Okay. Just great interest rates right now.
But right now, they're pretty much competitive with everyone else. And there's not much out there right now.
No, okay. And then, what they do is we give them a lump sum and they in turn deposit it into different
Financial institutions.
financial institutions that meets the,
Right.
governing, requirement that our money would be protected.
Correct.
Correct.
Sure.
Okay. All right. And these are just another one that we would add to our list of depositories.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, because if you remember, in
As we-
April of each year,
Yeah.
we renew that resolution authorizing depository institutions. Now this is
Correct.
just adding to that list, and then in April, this one will be on there.
right, and so, just safeguards our money
Mhm.
for the
Yep.
community.
That's what I
Right.
said.
Mhm.
That's right, okay. Any other questions from anyone on this? All right, I make a motion then to approve a resolution designating American Deposit Management Company as a public depository.
Second that?
Motion's been made and second to approve ADM as a public depository. Is there any other further questions, comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right, now, I know we spoke in this
Slide it, you guys want to come?
the item number 4, which is the wastewater and light commission 2015 budget review and approval. Mr. Brown and
Mr. Coon.
Jeff. Right, Jeff. Nice. All right. Well, if you'd like to go ahead and make your presentation, appreciate it.
Sure, so what we sent to everybody was the final draft of our budget that our commission approved back on September 26th. Just wanted to give a real high-level overview of how the budget's set up and kind of our accounting system and how things work. Talk a little bit about some of the major issues that are in the budget, and then just kind of give a chance for questions and that. Anything else you want? No? Okay. So our accounting system and our budget in turn are formed under FERC's Uniform System of Accounts, which is very detailed. Makes us do an accrual-based accounting system, really defines what's operational, what's non-operational, what's revenue versus what's a decrease in expenditures, really defines transactions very detailed, and that's how we are required to operate. It also does activity-based accounting, which the city also does in the budget. So you don't see things like salaries, fringe benefits, supplies in our income statement. They're broken down into the activity that they go to. So you see maintenance of overhead, maintenance of water mains, and those kind of things within our budget. And that's how we budget for those numbers. On the revenue side, our rates are set by the Public Service Commission. Process can take months. Our electric rate case went into the PSC in April. We're looking at a hearing on that next Thursday, the 16th, so, or 13th, I believe, yeah. So that is incorporated into our 2015 budget. On the water side, we've got incorporated a simplified rate case. For a utility our size, the Public Service Commission gives the leeway to incrementally increase your rates. So what a simplified rate case does is it'll raise rates 3% across the board. So you don't have these big 20, 30, 40, 80% increases in water rates that some utilities have seen, since they don't raise rates, often enough. So you have 5 years to do that from your last rate case, and our last rate case was early 2011, so we need to get this incorporated sometime in 2015.
And on the electric rate case, the last time we increased rates was in 2009, was when I first arrived on the scene, and they really needed a rate increase. So this will be the first one since January 2009, and coincidentally, it'll probably implement it in January.
So 6 years. Okay.
On the water side, we're looking at, a 3% increase would be about $150,000 annualized. In our budget, we're looking to implement that around the April, May timeframe, so we're looking at about an additional $100,000 in revenue, to our budget this year.
Based on 2/3 of the year.
Exactly. There's a few touch points between our budget and the city's budget, just wanted to kind of put out there, make sure people are aware of, that we have talked about them and kind of come to agreement. The joint meter costs, this is the charge that Water and Light, charges to the sewer department, for billing and collections, and all of that. Those numbers have been kind of discussed and agreed upon, between Tim and myself. Water main costs, at the time of our budget was done, the projects and the amounts were agreed upon. Now I understand there might be some discussion as far as different project that might take place instead of, but the dollar amounts, my understanding is not gonna change, so we're okay with that.
Okay, so what you're saying, Tim, and maybe Tom on this one, some things identified early in the process have changed.
Yeah, we're currently looking at those options and working through them. I think there are some things discovered since the time that we, finalized the budget on those and stuff, so we're kind of working through through those and trying to make a decision on what we want to do, but I don't think overall we'll have a major budget impact.
Right, I think we have budgeted $595,000 right now for water main construction, and as long as we stay within that number,
Yeah.
we're content. Knowing that there's additional projects that need to be done.
And Tom, you're aware
Can't be all
of
done at once.
that? Dave brought that up to you, that there might be some changes, or?
Not that
Not
I
yet.
recall. That's-
Okay.
I think they're working on it, and once we kind of internally decide,
Come in the
we'll
last
come up with
2 weeks or
recommendation, then they're
so.
gonna
Oh,
take it
okay.
to Public Works.
So that is
Yeah,
a
it's in,
recent
it's
change.
in work right now internally.
They're gonna stay with the budget.
Yeah.
All right.
There's the shared GIS position that the city has the position and we do the funding for. The budget that the commission passed, we're keeping the funding levels at 2014 levels, which is $30,000, with the idea that we'll revisit that position in 2015 to see what the utilization is of Water and Light
Okay,
and adjust that number potentially in 2016.
all right.
And the final ones are our pilot payment that we pay the city every year. Those numbers have been shared between, city council and myself, and we're kind of comfortable with those numbers.
And,
Keep making investments.
right.
Save some money this year.
Yeah, right.
6,000?
That's a rounding error, I think, isn't it?
No, with the
No,
mid-state
the
rate
mid-state.
being
Oh,
half.
yeah,
$75
that's a
grand.
little bit, yeah.
Little bit. That's a lot of cash.
Well, when you're looking-
That's a lot of cash.
Well, when you look at the overall number.
I know.
Not that I'm complaining, we're happy to be here.
And for folks at home, pilot means payment in lieu of taxes. Those entities that are, in a sense, tax exempt will pay, make a payment in lieu of taxes to a community typically.
Probably if you want to take a look at the budget, the best place to kind of start and just see what's going on, if you look at page 6 on the electric rate of return.
Okay.
This is just gonna give you a real quick snapshot of where we expect the year to be and how we expect operations to end. So we take our average utility finance plant, add in materials, subtract out accumulated depreciation and our regulatory liability to come up with a rate base. From that, you divide your operating income by that rate base. So we're anticipating about a $1.3 million operating income. Divide that by our 27 million rate base to come up with about a 4.76 rate of return in 2015.
So 1% under authorized. Okay. At this time, do you have an anticipation of what the average homeowner should see as a change in their rates?
Yeah, we do.
And that would take place beginning perhaps in January?
What we're expecting right now, like I mentioned before, our hearing is November 13th. We recently discovered it has to go in front of the full Public Service
They will?
Commission.
Okay.
And that'll happen the next week, so around the 20th, that'll happen. We expect them to issue that order on or around December 1st, which means those rates will go into effect December 1st, which
Okay.
means our ratepayers will see those in their January bills.
Okay, all right.
A typical homeowner their typical is 674 kilowatt hours. The amount they say is gonna go up about $4.50 per month.
Per month. So roughly $55 a month for a typical homeowner, okay?
Sure.
And then, something that's been in the news recently, of course, is the charges that Wisconsin Public is considering in fixed costs for your meter there at your home.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what are you doing for that, for the ratepayer here?
Right now, our monthly customer charge is $7 a month. What we're looking to increase it with is, in this rate case, is $9 a month. So it's about a 30% increase. Not nearly the 150% that Wisconsin Public Service is looking for, but at least, you know, kind of taking care of some of those cash flow issues, taking care of some of those potential distributed generation issues in upcoming years, and at least getting that process started on that
At
customer.
$9, that doesn't even really cover our fixed costs, not even close, but
So then for a person at $4 a month and this additional, you're looking at maybe 75, in the ballpark of 75. What I'm saying is 12 times 4 bars up to 50, and then 24.
that was included in it.
It's included, that
Oh, that
450
was-
included.
Yeah,
Okay, so that's
450
not
month is
separate, but
included,
included
right,
in itself,
yeah,
okay.
right.
Alrighty.
What's the percentage of the rate increase on the electric side?
Over 5, right?
On the, for a residential customer, they're estimating about 6.4%. Overall, it's about a 5.5% increase to our revenues.
Which means they took it a little easier on our commercial and industrial customers in town with how they've distributed the revenues.
You said what overall, 5.1,
5.5.
5.5?
And our budget, when we look at our budget on our electrical revenues, we're projecting about a 5.25% increase in revenues. We are projecting a little lower demand for the residential side of about 0.6%, just looking at historical trends and where things are going. So the rates will go up, but the revenue won't be that full 5.5%, so we're anticipating a little lower revenue increase.
What are you allowed to increase by?
Whatever the PSC tells us ultimately, so we're
I
allowed,
wasn't sure if that was a
right.
fixed number,
No,
like,
that's-
you're set at 5% each year you can increase by.
We're allowed to earn 7% on the electric side,
Okay, so
on
you're
the water
still-
6%, but they haven't given increases up to that rate of return
I got you,
in recent history.
I got you.
So it's kind of, yeah, they use this rate of return function as opposed to a net income function. So we can earn, right now it's 7%, and our most, in the rate case that goes through will be 5.75%. So they set the rate saying, we're gonna try to get you as close to that 5.75% rate of return that we can get you to.
And then even after the rate increase, we're still out of the 86 utilities that operate within Wisconsin, we're still being a lower third as far as electric rates. And some of those are in the process of getting theirs raised as well.
All right. Any other questions? Ken, do you have any questions? No. Okay, Mayor?
You guys have made some significant inroads in collections, and just collecting off of bad debt, which was historically written off. Any numbers just to share with the committee? You know, I was looking for it now, and here I've seen it on the monthly reports that I get. I mean, how has that affected your overall budget picture? Hasn't been that
And I'll let
substantial.
Jeff get into the details, but I know when we ultimately made this switch after AMI to monthly billing, that's helped because we don't have to catch up on water customers once a quarter, it's basically monthly.
The write-offs essentially were, I mean, just such out of control. I mean, by most standards, right? I mean, whether it's utility standards or not, people
Right.
just look at those
Correct.
numbers and.
But you look, even when our write-offs were high, they weren't high as a percentage when you look at other industries. I mean,
Sure.
we do have a good lever,
Mhm.
but you're right, I mean, it was significant income that
It's just that somebody else is picking up the gap, then if you're not collecting on it, whether it's a
Correct.
rate of return or
Correct.
whatever else.
we use the other tools to do that. We're using the state tool to collect on income taxes when people are behind, and other tools that we've implemented in the last couple of years. We've never disconnected water customers in the winter. We started doing that a few years ago. So there's been a number of tools that we've implemented that have helped that number.
Right, and I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but if you look at month-to-month comparables of our accounts receivables, we're almost, probably $800,000 less on our current receivables just on better collection efforts, so things are going pretty well.
And I think I saw that reflected in one of the reports I did see myself, how less your unrecovered expenses are. So, okay, that's
Jim, I have
good. Yes, Mayor.
two questions. The Eighth
Page,
Street,
please.
I'm sorry?
Page.
Oh, page 19, number 7, the replacement of the Eighth Street lighting. I know that's been talked about in a couple of years
Correct.
now. What project scale or where is that anticipated to start?
Well, I think we'll get with the city before we start
Okay.
that, but we know that the underground needs to be replaced in most parts of Eighth Street. And the plan is to go to a overhead LED fixture.
Okay.
But exactly where we start, and I'm just letting you, that's a pretty small part of Eighth Street when you look at
Yeah.
from Grand all the way down to Walmart.
Yeah.
But it's a start, and we plan to budget something every year to try to tackle that project to make it look nice.
And then the conversion to LEDs, I know it's been asked in a number of pockets. We've talked about it internally,
Correct.
but is there anything planned for 15 from an expenditure?
Well, I think, once we get the rate structure, which we've talked
Yep.
about on the LEDs firmed up as a result of this rate case, I think, we will look at some type of plan to when a lamp fails, just to replace it with LED on all the older street lighting, and I mean, anything new that we put in would then be LED.
Yeah. But nothing
we
for a
look at a
large scale
replacement.
conversion at this point then?
And, no, I mean, you might have seen our trucks actually out the last 3 weeks. We've been working guys on Thursday, a double shift in order to go around town, and we finished the west side of town, and we're now working on the east side, relamping everything that needs to be replaced, because we noticed there were a lot of lights out, so that's in the process now. But when we get the LEDs finalized, we will probably look at a plan to just replace whatever fails with an LED.
And so the rate, that is built into the rate case, right, based on our
Correct, yeah,
previous understanding?
yeah.
Okay. Second question, what for wage increases did you have projected in here? Was there any across the board?
We just used a 2.5% increase for payroll.
And that's totally a placeholder. I haven't begun to even look at that for next year, and that's a commission decision, as you
Yep.
all know, Mayor.
Right.
So,
Just curious what was
Yeah.
built in there, since you don't, as you said, how your accounting works, it doesn't, it's clear as if people were to look at it and say, well, where is it in here? I think those were my 2 questions.
All right. Anyone else have any other questions at this time? Anything to offer, Tim? Any discussion? Okay, good. All right.
If he's not gonna go on with anything further, I did have a couple other ones. Couple other questions. Are you?
Sure.
Is your
Sure.
presentation done, or is that where
Yeah,
you're leaving?
that's fine. The main intent was to answer any questions you had.
Fair enough, fair enough.
Give us a page, please.
Well, looking at page 20, and this is saying from 70%, 40 to 70% of all outages from animals. Looking at purchasing animal guards for transformers located in the most recurrent problem areas.
Most reported.
Yep. Have we begun, I know there was talk of this in the past, I don't know how far it got, but have we begun installing new power lines as underground run rather than overhead? And then are we also retrofitting and taking down old overheads and putting them underground? in
We
existing
have a
areas?
certain amount budgeted every year to replace old underground and to put some stuff underground. I mean, the squirrel guards has been going on for a couple of years
Yeah.
now, we budgeted money for that. In certain areas of town, I mean, once a new residential area and what have you, all of that is typically underground in
Right.
the downtown areas. But if we were to tackle it, putting our whole service territory underground, we would not be able to pay the rates that would result of it.
Sure.
When you look at our reliability numbers versus the rest of the nation, we're right there. With being highly reliable.
Sure.
So, but it's, and we are doing some backlot line stuff, replacing older stuff, we're putting it underground and some backlot line stuff too. So we do have stuff budgeted every year to do that. But-
Sure. It's just not a lot, just because of,
And,
Sure.
keeping in mind, we serve, I don't know, about 5,500 or 6,000 meters outside city limits on the
Sure.
electric side, so.
sure.
But definitely the squirrel guards that have gone the last couple of years have definitely made a big dent in the problem, so. our number
What
of
is
calls
that,
have really gone down.
what does that save us on an average? Like, how much does a squirrel guard cost?
Those things are only a couple of dollars. It's
Yeah.
Okay.
basically a piece of plastic and then it takes
And
them
it-
a half hour to put up.
Protects
So
They
the
put
bushing,
that thing
yeah.
up and it protects what, the line and the transformer both, and so if
Turns
a
the
squirrel can't get
transformer
up
that's
there.
used
is what, or is when we typically have the outage, when the cord was close to the fuse and blows it,
Mhm.
then that's when we'll have the outage, so that's
Sure.
where the piece of equipment goes.
So realistically, we're looking at, $5 piece of plastic and, maybe $50 worth of installation time to save, how much are these transformers, $1,500 or something?
Well, it doesn't, it just blows the fuse, which
Or
is
just a fuse?
a couple hundred, and then you got the call time to go fix
Sure.
it, so.
You're
yeah,
still coming out
You're
with
still coming away ahead, and it's
Okay.
the reliability it goes down to, probably
Yeah.
more than the cost, is just kind of keeping the system up and running.
Sure.
And you're affecting the customer's
Yep.
service.
Oh, absolutely. I was also curious about, I saw an increase listed for water revenue. Could you kind of go into some detail regarding the water revenue side of things like you did on the electric?
And do you have a page in?
Oh, it's just a general
Oh,
kind of
okay.
Oh, yeah,
Is
yeah.
there-
Sure, we talked a little bit about
Page
that simplified rate case that we're
Yeah.
looking to do on the water side. So every 5 years, we can go in, petition the PSC to increase our rates, simplified rate case, and they'll just increase our rates 3% across the board.
Without
Okay,
a
so this is-
detailed,
without a
full-blown
hearing
rate
case.
case,
Okay.
which they don't do on the electric side, they allow us to do that on the water side of the PSC, to defer some of these large rate increases some communities have had that Jeff had talked about. And we had a large one when I first got here as well in 2011, so to mitigate that, they allow these simplified water rate cases.
Sure.
So built into the budget on the water side is a 3% increase in revenues for next year.
Okay.
Assuming that we'll get that, or not a full 3%, probably about 2. Assuming
Actual
we get that in
2%.
spring or summer of next year.
And then kind of on the other side of the water increase, I also saw a reduction in sewer use fee revenues. Are you looking at then, would you be looking at a sewer use fee increase as well?
The sewer use charge, I think, goes up about $35,000 this year compared to last year.
Mhm.
Last year, there was a $50,000 credit
Mhm.
given to the sewer utility on that, that's what's making up. Some of
Okay,
that
so,
amount.
so that's not gonna see an increase at all.
It is because of the credit, correct? The
Right.
big increase was last year, our
Yeah.
smart meter program
Mhm.
finally got into the numbers for
So-
what the city pays.
Yeah, you'll see a corresponding increase in this, in our sewer utility budget for
Yeah.
that.
What is, do you know what that percentage or number, or, yeah, that percentage is, that the average homeowner would see on their?
Well, it's not, it's just an increase in an expense to us, it's
Oh,
in
okay.
a revenue to
Rates.
them.
The
Oh,
rate
okay.
is set.
Right.
I got it.
Correct,
Okay,
yeah.
so, okay. And then I'm just gonna say what I say every single year, since I got you guys both here. We always, and this is, we run into every single year, and I know you guys do the best that you can with it. We always talk about conservation efforts, conservation of water, conservation of power, everything like that. Hey, get on board with these, low flow toilets, low flow water fixtures. Get on board with LED changeover and stuff like that. And so, you guys push this as a way to save on utility, and to save on the maintenance costs and everything like that, obviously. And it's a green thing, you always wanna, do what you can there too, but, I think what people fail to realize then is that as you guys push these initiatives and people go out and they start doing them, and they're like, all right, yeah, I'm really seeing, I'm seeing a $10 a month reduction in my electric bill because I changed my entire house over to LED or whatever it is, because I mean, it is a real cost, it is a real savings that you can measure. People see that, and then within a couple of years, you guys turn around and raise the rates because you're seeing a decline in usage. So, I mean, just, I know you're not gonna have a magic silver bullet, but I mean, there is that perception that, well, we took it again because they told us to save energy and save water, now
Has
they're
more to do
raising
with
that on
our
us again.
costs
So,
than conservation. Since I've been here, we've been a steady
Mhm.
275 to 285,000 megawatt hours a year our consumers use. And we're a real steady customer base because we don't have any real huge industrial customers. We have a couple of marginally large industrial customers, but we don't serve the paper mills, so our customer base does not, people, if we ever want to borrow money, they really like to finance us because we don't have any large customer that could take us out of business.
Sure,
So it's more, after 5 or 6 years, your costs are gonna go up
sure.
in any business, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
So it really doesn't have anything to do with declining energy consumption. On the water side, if anything, we're espousing
efficiency, so we don't have to build a new well in town and raise rates to finance that well and serve the community. So I think conservation is good for everybody
Sure.
involved.
And
Now, if the EPA has its way here in the next couple of years, you may see rates
Yep.
go.
And I raise it like this, you know, cause, I mean, no matter what's done, you know, there is gonna be that perception from people out in the community, that's what's
Right,
gonna
right.
happen, you know, so.
But that's not the perception, I mean, it's just a general, and we've
I mean,
spent
it's
a lot
not
of
the
money
re-
since I
it's not the
first got here
reality, but people are gonna,
to increase
those
reliability.
are the 2 points that people are gonna connect, you know, that's what they're gonna see, that's what
Probably
they're gonna
true.
believe. But I
But
mean, whether or
energy
not it's
conservation's
not
been around.
reality, but, you know, and I bring it up like that, cause, you know, one, I think it's something that is not you know, not easily seen by the average person, but then it gives you guys kind of a way to talk about where these rates actually come from, these increases actually come from, which is good, cause
Well, and
it
just-
gets, it gets
They're
some of that
heavily
out of there, you know.
scrutinized, believe me, I mean, we.
Yeah, and just to let you know.
Karen's here, so.
When you take a look at our budget, you know, roughly 75 to 80% of our operating expenses is purchase power.
Yeah.
So I mean, as that goes down, and when that does go down, I mean, that's a real, you know, 80% correlation of our actual costs.
And then again, with that whole green initiative thing, I mean, I had seen something not long ago that was talking about, you know, for future generations, you know, that we're gonna need to really start evaluating where we're actually getting our power from, what sources we're getting it from, and really actually look more towards water, electric, hydrothermal, and nuclear. I know that obviously they're not buying any nuclear power right now, but, because we're not building any more plants,
I
but
think the state just closed one. huh?
yeah, and, you know, this is a whole other problem, but, I mean, what is our percentage? I know that with Blue that we purchase in off of hydroelectric and.
We're way above our renewable totals. The IOUs in our wholesale agreements have to supply whatever percentage retail they supply to their customers, they have to supply that wholesale. So we're getting roughly 8 to 9% renewables from the IOUs, and our goal's around 9%. And then we add another 4 or 5% from our Rapids portion of the hydro project, and we're well over 10%.
So we're somewhere
renewables.
between probably
Yeah.
13 to 15% of our actual power comes from renewable sources.
Right. Not to mention a few solar installations in town as well, but that's a small.
Private people.
Right.
I think, Andrew, one thing on the point of rate increases, how you can respond to folks is the fact that every new dollar that municipality or utility spends has to be covered somewhere in the revenue.
Mhm.
Whether it's 2% in wages, or health insurance contributions, or just cost of doing business, those things aren't flat.
Price of
every
wire
new
right now is
dollar-
a problem for us.
Well, so I
Copper's
mean,
going
every
straight
new
up
dollar
again.
that's expended has to be covered in
Yep.
an area that isn't growing, whether it's on the customer side or the taxpayer side or whatever. Unfortunately, we're squeezed to forced to do these things, and you know, we have levy limits, they don't, we have
Yep.
expenditure restraint, they don't, you know, so all the tools are on us now to force us to not raise costs. And unfortunately, others don't have that same sort of environment. While they do, I mean, they have a commission and ratepayers and everybody else to respond to. But I think that's the message, is we all have to understand that every time we increase our expenditures, for whatever reason, we have to raise our revenues. And unfortunately, in a situation like this, you know, there's a surplus at the end of it that's allowed, and I mean, those things are just. it's
Well, and you have to have
business
that,
now.
because you can go in the long run.
Right, but every new dollar
Yep.
that's spent, that isn't spent in the previous budget, has to be accounted for. And that's why it's, sometimes it's tension, or sometimes where there's issues that arise, and that's just the reality. You're gonna cover those costs somewhere. And they're gonna catch up to you, if they're in 5 years or
If you don't
6
cover
years,
them,
or.
they'll come up, catch
Yeah,
up
yeah.
eventually.
Mhm.
Thank you for indulging me.
No, no problem, not at all. If you take your utility bill sometime, just look at it closely, divide it by 30 days, to see what it's costing you to run your home.
Yep.
That's another thing a person can do as they want to watch their costs. Just, you know, we get everything once a month now, so divide it by 30 and just determine where are your expenses, how you might change them, if you'd like to. All right, any other questions or comments for the Water and Light budget review? Anyone? Sure.
Sorry.
It's okay,
Stealing
it's
your thunder.
okay. No,
I'd make a motion to approve the Water and Light 2015 budget. Motion made and second to approve. Any other discussion or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
in. Jeff, my apologies again.
Pretty much
Sit down
painless.
and we talk.
Pretty much painless.
Make it easy.
Okay, thanks. Item number 5 is a review of purchasing policy matrix. This is for discussion
matrix,
only.
The matrix.
You have yours?
I do have.
Tom,
mine.
do you want one?
I have my notes.
Click on it, it
Why
says
not?
go, huh?
Here, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes.
Do
And,
you want one?
okay. All right.
Just for discussion only. huh?
Right, to introduce us to it.
Okay. Basically what I'm starting to do is kind of rewrite or revise the city's purchasing and procurement policy. We've had a policy in place for many, many years, but kind of over the years, we've kind of strayed forward, hasn't been enforced, and it didn't really get into specifics as to what we require for like number of bids, what has to come through the finance committee, what doesn't have to come through the finance committee, and what requires written specs, what doesn't, what requires a purchase order. So as a starting point to revising that policy, I kind of came up with this matrix based on the nature of the purchase to kind of, and I just initially set some dollar thresholds and what would be required for that. And really what I'm looking for you is kind of from the finance committee standpoint, what types of purchases do you want to formally approve as a committee? You know, because a lot of times they'll have something specifically line item in the budget. It's been approved through the budget. Now, when the department head goes to purchase that particular item, do they have to bring that back through the finance committee, or do they have the authorization through the budget process? Okay. And so as you see here, under the different, and there's basically 3 categories, one that being the capital outlay, depreciation funds, and replacement accounts. That's all your capital assets, your vehicles, equipment, and such forth. Then there's obviously one called public construction, that any time that we do any type of construction, we're bound by it. We have certain thresholds and certain rules that we have to follow according to state statute. And then obviously the third category is just operating supplies, materials, and contracts. That it's stuff that departments purchase on a daily basis for maintenance, and a lot of times we have contracted maintenance agreements that are every year. One, I'll give you an example that comes through the finance committee every year, is Jim Borski always brings his bids for paint, for striping the roads and the curb. And so every year he goes out and gets his bids from his vendors, and he brings back through here. And it's a budgeted annual item. It's something we do each year, and it's something well, do you want to see something like that, or can Jim just go get the bids, submit that to the finance department, get the purchase order, and we know it's in the budget, it's approved, and we just go ahead?
Because the anticipated bid is less than the.
Well, yeah, we would still be
budgeted
reviewing,
cost.
requiring X amount of bids. We'd be still looking at going with the the lowest cost, being the least qualified.
Right.
Least qualified. Most
Can't believe
expensive,
that.
least qualified.
Well, the rockets to the moon went on the lowest bid,
Right.
right?
Yeah, right, yeah.
Okay.
And so kind of what I'm looking for you is where are you comfortable with having some of that, stuff that's line item in the budget, or it's a budget annual operation or maintenance type. What do you want to see, and what can maybe internally we can through this process of, because there will be an internal double check with the purchase order, because they're gonna have to submit the required number of bids. And then obviously then give that to me, and then I'm gonna have to verify that it was in the budget, and that's according to our policy and thresholds, spending authorization before I issued the purchase order.
And this is something I've only worked as a craft, so I've
Mhm.
not worked in management.
Right.
I've taken a business like Terry's there, where he works.
Right.
Other businesses, private businesses, may have certain guidelines like this as
Right.
well. For example, the
Mhm.
phone company where I retired from.
Right.
The person over in charge of house residential installation
Mhm.
would have had a guideline that said, you can do this. If you want to do more, then you have to come
Right.
back to us. So this is bringing into use something that is a common practice outside of city government.
Mhm.
And certain,
Yeah, I mean,
certain business endeavors may use something like this.
Mhm.
Right, okay.
And it's just giving the department knowing exactly what authority they have to go out and purchase items and what, they should bring back through committee for approval.
Mhm.
And, and as you can see, like under the outlay, if you go down to the approval of the reward, like for items specifically identified in the current fiscal budget, I have up to basically just under $10,000, the department heads authorized that if it's line item in their budget, they had in their budget, it was approved through the budget process. They can, once the budget's approved and we get into the new fiscal year, they can go out and get bids, submit that to the finance department, get the purchase order and purchase it. Between 10 and 25,000, we had built in there is that whereas the mayor would give that internal, they would go through the same process of getting the bids. They would go to the mayor saying, he would give his okay to it, and then obviously it would be given to me, and then we'd issue the purchase order. And then anything over 25,000, they would bring back through the committee, if you're comfortable with that. And that's what I'm kind of looking for, is what you're comfortable with looking. Now, obviously, on the next line item, if they want to go out and purchase something that's not line item specifically in the budget, then we have a little bit more scrutiny of it, for award that basically anything over 2,500 to 10,000, they would have to go through the mayor to get that approval, and anything over $10,000, that would have to come through the finance committee. And you'll see that kind of throughout the varying things on operating supplies, materials. Basically, the department head has a little bit more leeway. I'll give you an example, is like when we get our chip sealing, when we buy the oil and the aggregate they put on there, that, obviously that's a very expensive item, that we do it every year. It's budgeted street maintenance that, Jim Borsi's department head would be authorized to go purchase those materials, without having come through the committee.
Right.
But we should be getting 2 or more written quotes.
Yes,
And in
but-
some cases, those things don't exist today, so
Right,
it's.
and they're still gonna have to get all the, as you can see, the bids, number of bids, we still have that, like, they'll still have to go through that process.
And you use that for each category here.
Yeah,
Two
so-
or more written bids. You do have verbal.
Yeah, for some of the smaller items, sometimes if they just get verbal bids and then document, that's where they still have to document that, I got a verbal quote of this,
Which
things
in
like
this,
that, but.
within this this day and age, give me an email.
Yep,
Okay.
yeah, and that's probably mostly what it will be.
Documentation.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would say this isn't really a particular circumstance. If someone's wondering, well, why are we bringing this today? And I think there's been many of circumstances that have existed in many, I would say every department since I've been here, that have crossed a situation where it would certainly be nice to just know what needs to be brought to the committee, what is internal approval, if it's budgeted or not, how many quotes need to be
Right.
gotten or not. I mean, I get calls from residents and they see a job that's done on city property and there's questions, well, when was the opportunity to get bids? Did bids, were they secured? And so this at least would help us, based on the project cost, identify where does it fall, committee and council, administrative approval, and even just to the public. So I just think it's long overdue, not to say there wasn't policies in existence, it's just that nobody, they were guidelines, they were suggestions. And this is somewhat of a catch-all. And I think department heads really appreciated this concept too, because they also now know what needs to be done. What's the path forward to get this purchase approved, whether it's internally or through council, or even forcing them to get things identified in the budget, something that we've strongly suggested, that they do their homework before the calendar year starts, and they get those things in line items in the budget for particular expenditures. Jim?
Yes,
What this would take out of the hands of the committee then would be the where and who you got stuff through mostly. It would be at the discretion of, say under $5,000, it would leave more to the discretion of the department head than say, when things come here, like for Solaris bids or whatever, that's one of the criteria that we wanted to always keep in touch here, was where the bids were going to, where they were going to in-town bids, and that's one of the things that,
Tim?
Right, and obviously this is just the starting point, there'll be a
Right.
formal written policy. In that policy, I'm gonna have some specific guidelines for using local vendors when all possible that, you know.
I mean, you're right, this is something that has to be done, because there was always
Right.
confusion about, it's already, stuff would come to the committees, and you'd say, well, this is already in the budget, why are we looking at it? Well,
Right.
there are certain other things that
Mm.
get brought up, like, who are we gonna do the work, you know, it's all those small things.
Right.
It's something that comes out of the committee's hands, though, if it leaves here, but if you have those things nailed down in specifics elsewhere, that's.
Right, yeah, there's gonna be a specific section on local purchasing and very driving home hard that, you know, we should use local
Right.
vendors whenever
Yeah.
possible. I mean, and not saying that isn't happening now, but
Right,
it's
exactly.
gonna be one of those checks and balances.
It's an
in there.
oversight that the
Yeah.
committee sees, and, you
Yeah.
know, and in the future,
Right.
maybe if this gets implemented, it's more
Mhm.
at the department head level that, oh yeah, I'm bound at all,
Mhm.
if at all possible, to use local vendors, so.
Right.
And really targeting routine, I think you said that,
Yes.
was what are the routine functions that are coming to the body and carving out the time that is spent on routine functions and decisions to having more of a strategic discussion
Mhm.
about different things the city should or could be spending its time on. I mean, to be real frank about it, I think that's the opportunity.
Oh, that's understood, certainly.
Mhm.
Andy?
I think this is, you know, good and starting out in concept. I'm curious about how everyone kind of feels about, the micromanaging aspect of it from the committee standpoint. Not that there shouldn't be
Mhm.
committee oversight to it, but I think you nailed probably one of the best examples would be, in streets with the paint and the glass beads. You know, we bring that back every single year.
Mhm.
But I mean, even other stuff like steel and bolts and aluminum for signs and poles and things of that nature. I mean, what's your threshold that we're hitting now where previously, let's just say that we bought, you know, $15,000 worth of angle steel to repair the trucks or, you know, of aluminum to make new signs in the sign shop, things like that. I mean, now something like that would have to come, you know, before the finance committee, where previously that may not have been necessary. Maybe those are bad examples, but,
Mhm.
you know, I mean, what, are we now micromanaging some of these things that necessarily don't need to be because
Mhm.
they're in the scope of a daily operation?
Right, and that's
you know?
where, under the operating, if it's part of normal operations,
Okay,
it would,
okay.
the department head has.
I just saw public construction,
No, if
so
you-
I thought you were dividing it down into,
No, if you turn to the
like
left,
departments and things
right,
like
no,
that.
if you turn
Okay, I got you.
operating supplies, materials and contracts, you'll see that for basically operating type stuff, where they're day-to-day operations, where they have to go buy parts for the maintenance of the fleet vehicles and signs
Sure.
and stuff, is that the department head has basically that stuff with, that the approval of
Okay.
the department head.
That
Those
was my
things would be
biggest
done.
concern. I
Yeah,
guess,
no,
so.
we wanna create more micromanage, we
Yeah,
wanna,
yeah, streamline the process and, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that's.
Do we have a not so good example of something, I mean, if anyone's interested, maybe we have some to share. We'll say that after the meeting if someone has a question. Not that there was really any egregious use, but it's just, you know, how do we keep everyone, department head,
Right.
other staff within the department too, from the oversight level that even administratively,
Mhm.
we have the oversight that doesn't currently exist
Sure.
today. So even beyond the committee's sort of oversight, there might be some internal control that we'd like to have.
Mhm.
Okay. Tom, questions, comments?
Not yet.
All right.
There probably will be.
And what I'm looking for you is, you know, those thresholds are where you feel comfortable, what do you wanna see? I mean, that's really, I mean, I just kind of put this together, just, you know, just trying to get a starting point, you know? And, you know, that's what I'm, you know, I haven't even really talked to the department heads much about this, cause I wanted to get your feelings on, you know, since ultimately you're approving the budget and everything, is what, you know, what do you wanna see for, you know, for items coming through, or whether it's a dollar amount or types of items?
Well, one thing, for example, I might ask is, those capital outlay, public construction operating, what are some examples that fit that lower scheme, say of up to $5,000, and those from 5 to 10? Where it can be done with, written quotes and the department heads, okay, so, yeah, what might fit in there, and then, on the operating supplies, so on and so forth.
Okay, like,
What, What might be there?
Okay, like for outlay, I'll go like for something maybe under 5,000, I'll use the example of like maybe some radio equipment, for the police department or bulletproof vests. I know Jim Borski buys miscellaneous tools for down at the garage, that could be a
Okay.
couple of $1,000s that are technically outlay, and so that instead of, you don't wanna bring, you wanna really bring that through when they, they need to replace something down at the garage.
Okay,
Or certain, so that type of stuff that they're considered outlay because in the nature of where they're budgeted and things like that. So I mean, if you kind of look through the budget there, you can see some like smaller type
Right.
items
small
for
tools
like,
and
for
so
like,
on.
like public access, River Cities Community Access, they might buy some, smaller, equipment, what they need that's under that 5,000 threshold, and it's, it's line item in their budget, and so then they would have the authorization to just go and purchase that if you approved it through the budget process.
Okay.
As you see, is for stuff that's not specifically identified in the budget, we have a little bit more higher scrutiny for the approval, that the department's only authorized 2,500 and under if it's not specifically identified in the budget for an outlay thing. And then, then anything between that and 10,000, they have to go to the mayor to get his approval. Anything over that 10,000, they gotta come through the finance committee.
All right. And on the operating supplies, materials, and contracts, you're leaving it with the department head at all expense,
Stuff that's
including
budgeted.
over 25.
Right,
Stuff
that's
That's
their,
budgeted.
yeah,
That's
that's
budgeted.
budgeted.
Okay,
That's their operating expenditures,
Okay,
that,
but it's
their
operating,
normal
okay.
operations. I mean, it's not as clearly identified in the budget because we don't list out every piece of material that they'll buy
Mhm.
for street maintenance, storm sewer drain maintenance, or, the police department for what, their operating supplies are.
Okay.
But we're saying if it's part of your normal operations that you budget for and do annually, that you have that discretion. I mean, they're doing that right now.
So, well, maybe say an example, so the recent purchase of office equipment we approved,
Right.
that was like 40 grand? Was it?
Mhm.
So that was budgeted though.
Well, we budgeted, not specifically, because we've been putting away into a replacement
okay.
account.
So that would come to us then?
That would come to you.
Even under this new maintenance?
Yes, because it wasn't specifically, if we had those specific pieces identified in the
Yeah,
budget,
Stuff
then,
like that we wanted to.
Mhm.
Right.
but still, it was over the 25, so
Yeah.
regardless of what it came
Yeah,
to.
well, it came either way.
Mhm.
And I think the number of quotes or bids is important too, that we're now, in cases where there weren't multiple quotes previously, or a public, obviously the public construction kicks the public procurement rules and state law and all of that, so it forces our hand, but I think just the two or more written quotes is important. Maybe you wanna go three, I've given it a kind of a once over, and I might suggest erring on the side of yet one level of further control, that maybe we want three instead of two, because it makes sense to get
Yeah.
that third bid from somebody.
Yeah.
That's the one thing I guess I would throw out there that I haven't fully said this is
Yeah.
for discussion only at this point, I guess, anyway, so.
What if you throw it out for 3 bids, you only get 2 back? Or
Well-
like in the case of our public works issue,
Which one, yeah.
what was it, we only got 1 bid, or we got no bids back on it? didn't we?
Right, yeah.
One on the one.
Yeah, so, I mean,
Yeah, and what they do is they just document that, hey, we went out, we only got 2 bids back, and we sent them to this, and they just,
and then that would still be acceptable, a requirement
Yeah,
of
I mean,
3,
yeah,
but
'cause-
you put it out for 3, you sent it out to 4,
but you only
sent
got
it to 3 or
back.
4, but you only got back 2, so
Right.
that's still covered, and
So-
that's still considered. okay.
Right, and then the purchase requisition or whatever, they would just say, send to, receive back.
Okay.
We're saying you gotta make that effort to try to get, you're not always gonna be able to.
No.
And there's also that, there'll be a part in there about sole source purchasing, that sometimes there's only one viable vendor that you can get a particular part from,
Sure,
because of just the nature of that
if we
part.
go with this very specific style of
Right.
street lamp.
And we'll have, that'll be a section of the policy of where there's really only one viable vendor, for specialized equipment sometimes.
Through the years, I've noticed that with Maintenance Away, Dave will send out, and sometimes we get plenty of quotes back, and other times it's just
So-
don't
Get next to nothing.
We'll look at for asphalt now, I think we have
It's the only one.
American, and that's about it, is it right? Yeah,
Shame.
so in that case, we had no choice, but they get one bid.
All right, well, item 5 then is begin discussion on the purchasing policy matrix. Okay,
So where we'll
Thank
go from here is I'll start reviewing this with the department heads, get their input, and then I'll start drafting the actual verbiage of the policy.
Okay.
Could you
And bring
put
it-
some examples in there, Tim?
Sure.
This goes along what,
Yep.
I guess, maybe what we're doing now even, and how that.
I think should be in the guidelines.
Mhm. I will.
All right, item number 6 is a 2015 budget review.
Okay, more stuff.
Didn't change, did it?
We got a little reconciliation here.
Got the library of.
You're gonna have more
That's
anyway.
I was,
It'll change.
I was gonna ask if you had that in there.
Let's see how it's a spider web effect. How does that affect everything else?
Andy,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Thank you.
I'll just need another copy. Thank you, sir. And you'll make sure Chad gets a copy,
Yep.
right?
Hey,
Well, you haven't voted yet, Tom?
Yeah, I mean,
45, beginning.
Well, no,
Yeah,
it's-
that's-
no, that's only 6 o'clock,
I
Tom.
know.
Okay.
And they got, yeah, no one else to panic.
Okay.
So I'm gonna be all screwed up.
Pardon?
What my notes is.
It's an ever-changing.
I just got called away, so.
Oh, is there an item you'd like us to look at?
Nope, just looking at the whole thing, so.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right, you're welcome. Thanks, Andy, for coming by. All right, so since we last met, the mayor emailed each of the aldermen that there's a, tonight, that a question came up on the roof of the library. So why don't we attack that first?
Sure. You want me to?
Tim, go ahead. Numbers are there. I think it's
Okay.
easier- The numbers are easier to, I think, to look at and understand.
Okay. I'll basically go down to, see footnote number 1, that we're kind of like, groups it all together. And just to kind of give you a brief, here's, what the sheet you got here is just basically a reconciliation from the budget you got on October 3rd to the budget that exists now, because we've had changes with the library roof, we've had health insurance plan changes, because our open enrollment just finished, so some people changed their health plan, so we had to account for that in the budget.
Okay.
Estimates on some of the revenues have changed since the last budget, so what I attempted to do here is kind of reconcile the two budgets to show you where all the changes came from. You can see from the general fund, it's, the net effect is $4,700, and a lot of them, it's just a zero effect, but the line items have changed, but there isn't anything overly dramatic other than probably the library roof, and so I'll start there. If you go down to footnote number 1, basically $100,000 was added into the library outlay for their new roof. I think the estimated total cost for that is $200,000. So we put $100,000 into the outlay. That was funded by the library reducing some of their operating expenditures by $25,000. I think their periodicals, books and periodicals line item decreased, and some maintenance contracts also decreased, making it 25. They also increased their carryover of 2014 unspent operating funds by 25. So basically what they're doing is that they're gonna save some money this year, carry that forward, and that'll be appropriated to their outlay account. And then the city is contributing $50,000 from our municipal building improvement fund. Now, over the years, we've put money into that fund for, for building needs and issues over the years. And so we're taking $50,000 of that, putting it towards the roof. So basically, the city, we're funding 50,000 of it. They found 50,000 in their operating budget, both in this year and next. And then the residual will come out of their endowment to
Okay.
replace that roof.
All right. And in doing this, something like this, did you speak with the department heads about the changes that might take place? Okay.
Right.
So that they're aware of these as well?
Yeah, you had
So-
a conversation with Ron about this, and
Okay.
the other big change was the police department
Maybe
operating.
one quick thing, just a quick note on the library piece. You'll see on the two budget, obviously the $100,000 expense, it's an additional $100,000 that the city is gonna spend next year that affects the downstream expenditures, the overall expenditures, so we had
In
to.
other areas.
Correct,
What
so,
you're taking is, you had a completed budget. You said
Yeah.
now to help the library, you're gonna pull $100,000 out of those first identified items.
Mhm.
to accomplish
Right.
this.
But the overall spend is higher, so for things like expenditure restraint, which is the state's way of saying you can't spend more than a certain percentage of your.
Right.
That changed that, so we had to now reduce some of the other areas, and Tim will go through the rest of them, but just to kind of go into the rest of the items with that thought, that
Right.
because you give 100,000 here, another 100,000 has to come from somewhere else within the budget.
Even if you know, yeah, with expenditure restraint, our general fund expenditures could go only up X percent
Well, we can.
based on a formula that the state sends, and
That's
you know, you get to some points where even if you had the money, you can't budget the 100,000 because that'll put you over the expenditure restraint. So we had to kind of shuffle some things around to get around that. The second change was police department operating increased by 11,126, and that was due to some of the personnel in that department changing their health insurance plan. Open enrollment just ended not too long ago, and they finally got the changes on those.
So an individual became a family.
Yeah, they increased their coverage, and then thus we have to budget that, so that's why they went up. The human resources operating budget increased by 2,600, and that's to provide some additional hours for the HR assistants for office coverage. Part of that increase was offset by a reduction in one of the line items within that budget. The office equipment and municipal building improvement fund, those were reduced to kind of reflect, to get under expenditure restraint and kind of offset the effect of the library expenditure. And with that 100,000, we had to reduce expenditure somewhere in the budget to get under expenditure restraint, and those were the two. I mean, with the office equipment, we feel pretty comfortable with that because we're already trying to take care of a lot of that stuff with what we approved last month, and we have some money still in that fund to fund the second phase of that. So feel pretty comfortable that we can probably reduce that, and the municipal building improvement fund was reduced because we're basically just replacing that 50,000 with that 16 in the budget, and hopefully maybe next year we'll be able to work that 16 back in the budget for other buildings, but we, you know, with expenditure restraint. And the contingency, you show a big reduction in the contingency, you know, and really what that was when the budget was initially done, it was kind of like the contingency was a placeholder because we were looking at maybe adding in some of that office furniture or with the library roof pending out there, so we kind of put it in there and weren't flushed out, but we wanted to kind of get up near that expenditure restraint, kind of as a placeholder, and then so then when the library kind of went in there, we reduced that, but then we also see a corresponding reduction in fund balance applied to 59,000, so that was kind of almost a net zero effect. So as you can see, it's a total increase, a change in the budget of $4,764 on the expenditure side. And then on the revenue side, property tax in the general fund went down 21,000. Basically, the bulk of that is 20,000 was transferred to the Public Works Construction Fund because some of the fund balance applied in the Public Works Construction Fund with where we're kind of estimating way things are going now that we might not have that much carry forward. So we kind of lowered the fund balance, the carryover funds in Public Works Construction, and increased the tax levy and reduced the tax levy in the general fund. So it's basically a net zero effect on the property tax. Property tax equivalent, we had to drop 10,000 because of, that's that pilot payment to Water and Light. And based on when we get the rates coming in from like the school district and MSTC, those rates, those go into a calculation. So when we recalculated it, we lost some revenues based on the lower rates. The general transportation aids, we shortly after the budget was distributed, we actually got the general transportation aids estimates, and good news for Rapids is that our aids actually went up, which is, if you know what's been happening over the past number of years, our aids have been going down. We actually got an uptick, which was very good. Let's see, the fund balance applied, and I just explained with the contingency, and then and obviously the library and fund balance are the offsetting revenues to the library.
Mayor, have you and the library board discussed this proposal?
The board, no, director, yes.
So you
Yeah,
talked
and they've
to them,
accepted, yeah, from what I understand.
And the board approved the revised
Yeah.
budget.
Okay.
And then because of the endowment, they were
Yeah,
able to,
right.
to make up the difference with the endowment, yeah.
So,
So that issue, to further your question, yes, it's been settled, from what we understand as of today.
Okay, so they're on board with this.
Correct, yeah.
The
That's
changes.
the way I should answer the question.
so it
yeah.
seems like a lot of jockeying around for $4,000, but that's kind of some way they,
No.
the budget, how they you pull one lever and you gotta get in that effect somewhere else.
There have been times in the past when they came to us, when I've sat on the council before, and I said, you know, I just don't like paying debt, but you can't tax for $1 million for a year either, you know, there's
Yeah,
no
that's
way you
very
can do
true.
it, you just can't do that. You do have to spread it over time and absorb the cost of the indebtedness.
Yeah, and, you know, and we'll get to, you know, because obviously the budget contains a $1 million note issue to support the capital projects, and, you know, and kind of one of the effects of, you know, expenditure restraint and levy limits are, is because debt's excluded, that I've heard from a lot of communities how their debt is going up because that's the only way they can afford
Do something.
to do something is because they can't levy for things because of the levy limits, so they have to borrow for it, which is excluded from the levy limits. When you levy that tax, then repay that debt, it's excluded, so.
I guess I still have a hard time wrapping my head around how you can carry so much debt and still
Yeah.
fall within the state statute of having a
Yeah.
balanced budget.
Or levy limits, expenditure restraint, all of that.
You know, I mean,
It's
because
squeezing the
we have
balloon, though.
to,
You squeeze the balloon, you're gonna find a way to
Yeah.
get it done.
yeah, I mean, we have to have, you know, every dollar in is every dollar out, penny by penny, and,
But-
you know, I mean, we can still do it just by having, you know, by carrying debt, which I still find ridiculous. It's almost like a loophole.
Right.
You know,
But
to
usually,
the-
I mean-
To the state law.
And usually, you know, community, and most communities are like this, is that they're using the debt for capital type items. I mean, you're not,
Right.
you know, I'd never
You're not doing it
advocate,
for
I would never,
operations.
no,
No.
never advocate, if you're borrowing for operating, then you're starting to get in trouble. I mean, and it's just that, you know, before, if you wanted to do this street project, you know, you had that option of levying for it or, you know, borrowing for it.
The
Well,
old-
now
the
with
old
levy
adage-
limits, it's harder to do that.
The old adage of good debt versus bad debt.
Yeah.
You carry debt for a mortgage, that's fine,
Right.
but you carry debt on a credit card going down
Right.
every single week to pay off the credit card that you're using to buy the groceries, well,
Right.
then that's a problem.
Yeah, and that's why we've always used debt to support our public works construction on our street, and storm sewer construction.
Okay.
Centralia Center Fund, change there is increase in property taxes 36 and lease revenue, that's because that lease we approved that we thought was gonna start January 1st got delayed until April 15th, so I had to adjust the lease revenues down and increase the property taxes. The retiree health insurance, that reduction is just, it's the same, open enrollment. One of our retirees changed their coverage, which was actually in the down, they went from like a two-person to a single, so that saved.
Okay.
And then the net effects on the revenues down there. River Streets Community Access, we added in, in his outlay, he had some equipment budgeted, and we added in 1,500 for the installation costs of that equipment. And then the corresponding offset is that he had a contingency of 1,900, and that's where that 1,500 was, we dropped that, and that's how we funded that. So it's a zero effect, it's just a category line item change. Sewer utility fund, transfer to public works construction fund of 97, that was just to reduce and to reflect what was actually budgeted in the public works construction fund. We eliminated some budgets, so we're actually doing 301,000 of sanitary sewer construction, so we were able to reduce that. On the offsetting revenue side, the sewer use fee got reduced by 25 just on a revised estimate, and then the fund balance due to the reduction in the expenditure of 97, we were able to reduce that to $117.72 to balance that budget. Now, right now, for the sewer utility fund, at this point, we're still applying $117,000 in our budget to make it balance. And we have some capital needs out there with the West Side lift stations, some other things, lift stations. We have a televising program that we kind of want to expand and look at and kind of discussed internally. And one of the things we want to do is kind of do a little bit bigger picture view of, you know, maybe a 5-year picture of, you know, what are our demands for capital operating, and kind of do a projection to see where our sewer use fee needs to support those, so that we can have a better discussion about, you know, what we want to do, what our priorities are, and what that's going to mean to the sewer use fee, and trying to, you know, close the gap on the operating side, but still addressing and carving out some funds for the outlay or capital needs that we're going to have.
And I remember from last year talking about that, what was that percentage increase? Because that was pretty egregious, wasn't it, to cover up that difference there?
Last year we had a 5%.
We increased by 5% last year, and then to close this gap.
Yeah, I think it was more like 15.
Yeah, so that's
Yeah, and we're still working on some things with the polymer, with the Genbacher becoming more efficient, you know. I mean, we're still trying to see how those things are gonna,
Now
Sure.
we're gonna have to maintain it though, and you have to use the
Yeah.
same company. to
Yeah.
maintain
I mean, you
it.
see $26,000 to maintain, to
Yeah.
do its annual check, or not annual checkup, it's
Yeah.
whatever,
Right.
750,000 hour,
It's
maintenance check.
30,000
Sure,
mile,
sure.
33,000 mile oil change is what it is.
Right.
So, you know, so we got some things coming on the chemicals, hopefully that's dropping, so that's why we kinda wanna like take a little bit more of a longer picture look at our operating and our capital, so that we can come up with a funding recommendation, we can have a, you know, a really good discussion about
So
what
we're
we need to
still-
do.
We're still looking at least for 1 year and I would say probably 2 to 3 years, we're probably still talking about filling that gap out of, what did you say it was? What fund is that being?
Sewer use.
The sewer use is being.
Yeah.
Out of what, Public Works Construction Fund? Where was that additional coming from? To offset that loss?
We're doing less public works construction in the
Right.
sewer utility
Okay.
area,
Right.
which is
Right.
necessitating less
Mhm.
money, but to the point,
Well,
there's
what-
still long-term capital,
Right.
and there's
Right,
still an
right.
operational
Optional
deficit.
grab that
What
we have to-
line item is that difference coming out of right now?
The difference.
Well, I mean, cause you said you've
Well,
got like $100,000 gap.
that's our fund, that's our reserves,
Oh, but,
our reserves.
okay, so
That's what fund
we're
balance
operating
apply-
out of reserve.
City
Right, that's what fund balance
Yeah.
applies.
Okay, that's what I was getting
Yeah.
at. So I mean, probably at least 2 to 3 years before we actually figure out.
Yeah, I mean, at some point, you know, you gotta stop, you can't use your reserves
No,
forever,
no, yeah.
you know, and that's why I kinda wanna look and say, okay, we need to do a 5-year
You know,
and see what we really need to do, and then we also have some of those capital issues that we
Do
gotta
you
start
know-
looking at.
Do you know how long we can sustain that, or well, how long we can maintain that, doing it like this at this time before it becomes a serious problem? I mean, it's already a problem, but.
It's a problem, but I mean, we have adequate reserves right now that I'm not like, you know, that we have to, but yeah, we gotta start closing that gap, and that's what that 5 years is gonna do,
Yeah.
is really saying, is coming up with a plan, okay, how do we close that gap by solely getting off, utilizing the reserves in the budget and
Yeah.
increasing that revenue, and maybe there'll be some new revenues that come along in that same time.
You basically wanna have it solidified by 2020.
Oh, yeah, most
But to a
definitely.
greater extent is the capital
Yeah.
cost. It's the west side lift
Mhm.
station, the pipe under the river. I mean, there's some potentially dire situations related to wastewater, the sewer system that are real capital intensive, that we have this operational shortfall. We understand, but there's these capitals costs that are unknown today that have not been engineered or any design
Right.
costs associated. So the plan is, I think maybe the last 3 months, let's say, that we've had these internal discussions about what are the first year or first expenses we need to expend to get caught up in some of these unknowns,
Yeah.
to inspect them and then to get them put forth on a capital investment plan
So we
that
got
doesn't
pretty-
exist today.
So we got some pretty serious public works plans that are coming up in the next.
Expensive, I mean, that's
Yeah.
the reality, is the infrastructure's aged to a point that it's gonna need to be inspected and then planned for replacement if it doesn't need already to be replaced, sort of thing, yeah. So
Okay.
there's there's the operational and there's this whole capital issue, which is, even to a greater extent, is probably more of a concern.
It's interesting, cause I guess I hadn't heard any of that stuff.
Well,
You
and-
know,
Well,
but-
kinda.
Snuck up on you and bit you once,
Oh,
or?
I mean, it was like, let's,
Well, about 40 years ago, we did water, sewer and waste separation. What was it called, Tom?
Sewer separation?
Sewer
separation,
separation,
I think.
yeah, about 40 years ago.
Yep.
So those things that are in the ground for these past almost 40 years.
and all those pumps that run 24/7 that move stuff
You know,
to the treatment plant, all have a life expectancy, and that's the concern, is how long can we expect them? When was the last time we inspected them? How long will they last? I mean, there's some unknowns there.
when they break down, we still get
Well,
parts.
Well,
back.
that's it, I mean, we've got industrial users in the west side, you know, industrial park, that
What
need this,
capacity
that will
are
be
they
sending
at
their
now?
waste all the time, right?
Yeah.
And so we're gonna be planning for it, so.
Will
Those
the
are,
inspections be done of all of these to, I guess, about the same time? And then pick out what would be what to do first and second?
Yeah.
So we
yeah,
have an
right,
idea
that's the,
of
yeah,
I
exactly.
mean, all to start with, so we know what we're looking at.
Yeah, what's a 5-year plan? What's the cost to each of those years? And then what's the operational gap that we
Right,
wanna
and what do we
close?
need to,
Yeah.
what kind of revenues do we need to fund that, and the sources of that revenue? You
Yeah.
know, so, Instead of just kinda
That's,
going year by year,
yeah.
you know, we need to.
Starting to sound a little sketchy.
But important, right? You can't,
Oh,
you
God,
can't
yes.
run away from it. It's
Yeah.
there.
We're gonna be backed up to our ears and you know what.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Public Works Construction is what I, referred to earlier when, you know, some of the $20,000 was transferred to the general fund property tax to the Public Works Construction Fund. Because, some of the carryover funds that we thought we were gonna have, we may not have at the end of the year just because of some revised estimates in that fund. So that, I think this year it's gonna be pretty tight in there, so that's the reason why that change was made. And then tax incremental district number 6, and that should be 7. Oh, the second one, sorry
Oh.
about that. Those were just changes in the estimated tax increment, because as the rates for the school district and MSTC change, that increment calculation changes, and this is the net effect of those. And that's pretty much should be the differences between the two documents.
All right. Well, thank you for all that work.
Now you're at your additions
Oh,
now.
he hit
All right,
one.
now
He hit
your
one of my
additions.
questions.
I was gonna say, now for the additions.
Jim's gotta open it up. No, no, you hit one with the Centralia. So that was one of my questions because of the later start.
Mhm.
Yeah. Not a big item, but I'm still there.
Still something, yeah.
Yeah.
When it's, yeah. Gap regardless.
Does anyone have any questions?
I do.
Go
Well, I
ahead.
don't know about questions. Yeah, a couple questions, I guess, and I know I complimented everybody last time on a nice job on the budget. And I'm new to this game, not budgeting, done it with numerous organizations, but I'm just gonna ask a question, and I realize why it's down, but the common council conference budget or whatever, $500, I mean, that seems low to me, I don't know, maybe you guys have been here longer. I mean, if we wanted to send, say, our president to something,
Mhm.
$500, Terry Dolan, I'm gonna go pay $30 if I wanna go to something, but I think for a common council, people, you maybe could have, I don't know, a couple grand or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think,
I don't know where it
We've
comes
talked
from.
about it. No, we've talked
But-
about it. Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, that $500 has kind of been a placeholder for, I think, anyone that wanted, and I think it was for the league conference down in wherever
Wherever
it
it's
goes
at.
throughout the state,
Yeah.
and that was like for someone wanted to go there, but I'm trying to think of the last time someone,
Is that the quote unquote the expense account if we wanted?
yeah, if you wanted to go for it,
That's
but, you know,
what I'm saying,
obviously,
If I go to something, I'd probably pay for it, but.
you know, it's not, I mean, if multiple members wanted to go to various conferences, we would have to.
There's nothing there for registration even really,
There and
much
stuff.
less mileage at an
Mhm.
IRS rate. I mean, there's not a lot of, you can't
I'm-
drive very
you know,
far on,
Some of those
Yeah.
registrations are.
yeah.
$300 $100.
I'm from the
Yeah.
benchmark and looking at things, side of things, you know, with being in the military, you know, you look at best practice stuff and
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't know,
yeah.
a council president or whoever going to something, whether it's a national thing or whatever, it's gotta be
I guess I never realized-
beneficial.
I guess I never thought about it. I always thought the $500 mark, I thought that was 500 per individual council member. I guess I never really
No, you gotta-
realized that
you
was
gotta-
for, yeah.
That's why I caught it, 'cause- I mean, I'm guessing people that haven't gone, so.
Yeah, I mean, you
You
can see.
probably
it.
lowered the budget because you weren't using it.
Correct.
I'm guessing.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the last time we had,
And some people probably just go like, you know.
right.
just go.
That's page 20.
Yeah, I don't know who turned the money in. We haven't had anybody go to that, annual one for a while.
No, it's been a long time, and
I mean, I'm not saying it's gotta be $4,000 or anything, but a couple.
And it might be
great
something, yeah, going
people,
forward,
or
I wanna.
one or two
Well, there
who
should,
wants
yeah,
to go.
there should be something there.
Even in.
I don't know where you get it from.
For lost wages though, and we talked about lost
Yeah.
wages, that if we've got employed folks that wanna go, probably gonna be an unpaid time off. if
Well,
they're
we were
gonna
talking
be-
on the way in, if I wanna go somewhere usually on a Friday,
Mhm.
I got, you know, I pretty much gotta take a
Vacation day, right.
Which is
yeah.
fine, but.
Yeah, right, but you should be compensated if it's an unpaid time that you were
Yeah.
lost wages, I mean, that's kind of the
Mhm.
thought.
Right.
I mean, I don't know what that, you know.
Do we wanna come back with, some numbers? I know we crunched some numbers, cause, we looked at how, if we could bring somebody to an event, what the cost would be, what's the going rate today, whether it's state or outside the state, there's an expense kind of threshold.
I mean, you have, you know, whether it's Chad or whoever, if one person went and brought it back to us, you know, whatever.
Yeah,
You know, I don't-
Well, I think you
I don't
probably,
think 2,000 is unreasonable.
No,
I mean, you talk about the lost wages portion of it, I would say that's probably one of the single biggest inhibiting factors
Yeah.
from individual members actually going to some of these
Going to
things, you know, it's like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I'd probably go to one or two of these things, but, you know, I can't afford to take the time off of work or whatever the case could be, so.
I wasn't even thinking of that, I was just thinking of registrations.
no, I'm thinking the lost wages time, I think, yeah.
Maybe better
Yeah.
more than two.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, you know, that whatever that number is, I mean, there's 8 of us, you know, some guys probably don't want to go or they would just go on their own, but.
Right.
Tim and Mayor could come back with a number for us.
Sure.
Yeah, the
I
suggestion-
don't wanna
the
screw up- I
suggestion
don't wanna
was
give you a lot of
2,000.
extra work.
No,
You know,
I mean,
maybe we
it's not
could-
the-
We'll just come to the next meeting and say, well, because those additions of the last meeting.
He'll come back with another packet like
Well, I
this.
got
for
one more,
$4,000.
Exactly.
Throw them out there.
We'll massage something
Well,
in here.
you hit the Centralia, Sam, so I don't have that one. but
Yeah.
I do have one more, and this is, I know this has been discussed, because we just, you know, it's one of the reasons, to be honest with you, I got into I was really impressed with the west side, and that's not really, it's not in there. The west side cleanup and everything, I know that, I've talked to Chad numerous times, and I know he wants to have, we are going to have a committee of the whole, December, January, whatever it is, we want a spring citywide cleanup, and we want a budgeted item of about, I don't know, $6,000, you know, I don't know where that comes out of, probably Jim's side of things, I don't know, but we really wanna do that citywide. You know, and I know we gotta have a committee of the whole to talk about it, but I think we should have a budget, otherwise we're just gonna come back and. probably
Ask for it anyways, yeah.
Right.
But that's really it. I did have a question on the fire, the overtime, but I understand why it's high, you know, it's
Well, we
38
could talk
grand.
about that one too.
Well, we budget for overtime, I understand, but it seems pretty high to me, 38 grand. That's on page 35. Before you talked about it. I don't know, I'm hearing different things, I read the reasoning and everything, but
Well,
for my crew, I don't budget, you know, 200 people, I don't budget 38 grand for overtime. So I just questioned it, that's all.
I know Andy Nelson was saying the same thing when he was here, which is what he always said, was
Mhm.
police and fire for
Those
their
are most
overtime.
expensive.
Yep.
That's why I know it's because the police, I think, is only 2,400 or something. It's not very big, I didn't think.
But-
Maybe I missed it.
The increase or the,
The budget for, yeah, the
increase.
increase for fire was.
Yeah, 'cause it-
38,000.
was it increased from 211 to 250,000 and, you know,
I mean, I know it's probably you're not hiring bodies or something, I don't know, I don't.
Well, there's
I'm
part of
asking,
that,
I
but there's
guess.
also the rolling average, right? It's the
Right.
trend, and this number, I think, came from the trend
It's
for
a
14,
it's-
the increase in the 3-year average.
yeah, the
Yeah.
250 represents a 3-year average. I mean, you see like in 2012,
Yeah.
226, 230, but if you roll those up in today's wage rates,
And maybe that's.
and then you
maybe
take
they're
his
not,
2014, that 250 is right around his 3-year average. So what he's doing is he's bringing it up to what he's expected to expend in his overtime budget.
Where's it,
You know,
I'm
look
just
at
thinking of where we
35
ended up in 2014.
35 and 70 are your overtimes for police and overtime for fire. 70 is your police overtime. 35 is your firefighters overtime.
Did I miss that? You're correct. I mean, it's
Because
probably,
the fire department overtime through October this year is 224,000.
still got 24, yeah,
So he'll be right around that.
it'd be at 250. So maybe, I mean, it's just a question, right?
Right, no, I mean,
I'm not
that's,
saying we-
I mean, I discussed it with Dave Kirkman, fire chief, and, you know, and what I did is I had taken 2012, 2013 and projected 2014 and put it in today's wage rates, and that
Okay, no,
250 was
that's-
right around that 3-year average.
I don't know maybe what's driving it, if you look too at police department versus fire department, you look at their actual
Police
personnel.
actually can.
And I mean, I just grabbed the 5-year officers
Mhm.
and the 5-year firefighters. Fire department's got 14 individuals as 5-year tenured firefighters, the police department's got 9 individuals. you know, for 2015, and fire department had a higher pay scale, pay rate than the police department does, so I mean, that's also gonna be a contributing factor when you factor in, you know, any of those sick calls, those, you know, if you got a, what's it, 5-alarm emergency where everybody in the department comes no matter if they're on call or not, you know, all that stuff is factored in there, and then that'll help to drive that cost up too, whereas you have to have, what, a minimum of, what's the minimum staffing level, 7 per motor pump? 7 firefighters? I
know
can't
the chief
recall
was
right
talking
offhand.
about five or
Well, I
seven.
mean, there's also a question of what's minimum and what's our department's minimum.
Right,
There's a
what's standard and what's
discrepancy,
safe, you know,
right.
so then you get into that whole thing, and then we got, what, 3 crews, and then each crew, I think one crew runs a man short. So I think they try and offset that by having somebody on call at all times or something, don't they? So, I mean, I don't think it's a black and white thing. I think there's a lot of factors that go into that fire department overtime expenditure. And we've always, last couple of years, we've struggled with, do we need to hire another individual? Can we afford to hire another individual and keep them on staff?
Well, and if they're at 224 through October, that explains it a little better anyhow, so.
But there is a discussion I'll propose, and I know the chiefs aren't here, so we can't have a full discussion about it, but the discussion about those overtime dollars as the increase on an annual basis, to really determine, and they've made strides, I give them credit, and they've done more than the previous chiefs have done, so, and we all only been here for a period of time to know that, but the perspective that there's a question of what's actually a public safety concern, what overtime dollars are attributed to public safety concerns, and what overtime dollars are contributed to other factors, right? There could be 5 to 7 of them, depending on which department and what circumstances we're talking about.
Public
So-
safety versus personal department safety.
Yeah, right, or if it's from transfers, or if it's from this or that, and I think, so if there's a discussion to be had, it comes back to, we have one responsibility, and that's public safety, right? What's a public safety concern? And if it's having enough men, the personnel, to go into a structure fire, or, that's obviously, we all, I think, agree to that. But the real question and discussion needs to be had, to the extent of what policies the departments, the 2 departments namely, have that drive overtime costs. Part of it's scheduling, part of it's call-ins, part of it's transfers. There's a lot of factors, but I think I would just propose that that it would be a worthy discussion at some level, not necessarily exclusively to budget or to this time of the year, but HR, right, if it doesn't want to be on finance, you know.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
you do see the overtime, they gotta have certain staff and somebody gets called out on something,
Yeah.
so I understand that. And I'm just curious.
And I can't remember if it was Marion or Jean, and when we moved to that,
12-hour shift.
to the 12-hour shift in the police department, exactly. And I think it was Marion or Jean, one of the 2 of them, talking about, as they were exiting the council, saying, you know, certain things get done, and we say that we're gonna review them in 6 months and 1 year at specific intervals, and we never go back and do it, you know. And I think that 12-hour shift was one of those things that was supposed to be reevaluated. I don't know that we ever actually did do the evaluation on to see if it was saving us money, if it was, you know, if that scheduling issue was actually driving the overtime problem in the police department that we were having, so.
Well, I think when if I remember correctly, it's like they had a 6-month trial period, and I think that Randy John and Chief Hoyer kind of gave the HR committee kind of a synopsis of the overtime savings that they realized over that 6 months.
Okay.
You know, it's a matter of, okay.
And I think there was a reduction in it on that next budget cycle.
Well, and, you know, and the hard thing about overtimes is that, it's based on the nature of some of the things that happen within the departments as far as vacancies, FMLA issues and things like that, is that you kind of, things can get skewed from year to year because of differing situations. It's how do we kind of baseline that over time and kind of maybe subtract
What's a
out
normal
those
year?
things.
You know,
Yeah,
what's a
and
normal,
that's the hard
fully
thing.
staffed, what's the normal situation look like?
Because I know, like in the police department, sometimes they've had some high years because they haven't filled officers for a certain period of time, so then they have that backfill where it's like maybe they're over in their overtime, but they're short on their salaries, and
So it washes
know,
out.
and it's kind of like, okay, the challenge is, okay, how do we measure that baseline overtime for normal operations?
We can afford the salary, but we can't afford the roll-ups on it.
You know,
A lot of businesses run with, the total.
Yeah.
They just don't have a lot of relief.
Mhm.
And that was just a question. I mean, now you explained the whole year, I mean, I guess it's not.
But
Out of
we'll
range.
close that subject that I think the reality of the world that we live in today
Mm-hmm.
because of state law and other things, we have very limited and increasingly limited discretionary dollars. That we have total discretion over what we do with them.
Right.
At some point, that's gonna continue to shrink, and it'll depend on what happens after the polls close tonight, truthfully, largely next year. Because when the next biennium budget is proposed, and property tax relief is proposed or not, we're gonna be targeted, just like the rest of the public entities, in terms of how we reduce expenditures and control expenditures as we go forward. So that's my rant, but I think it's the reality
No, it's
though,
reality.
that, because if we wanna truly do things that we're not doing today, new projects, we're gonna be further hamstrung by whatever discretionary dollars are left over. So that's my rant, but I think that's just a call to alarm that we truly need to be having some discussions about discretionary funds that are substantial, right? I mean, it's not the 4,000 or 2,000 expenditures, it's some of the big ticket ones and how you free up those dollars for other things. Thank you for my, finance director will do this to
thank
me
you.
all day long, but it's the truth and I
I
think
gave Jim time to come up with a couple.
Just,
good, or
looking-
somebody else.
Or these guys.
Back on page 27, emergency communications budget highlights. Communications tower. Proposing to construct a new communications tower on city west side into the city garage. New tower would improve communications for city emergency personnel by eliminating radio dead spots. I certainly understand that. Preliminary estimate of $134,000. Over there in the backyard of the garage is a Sprint tower. Okay. They have a cell tower they put up a few years ago. Is there a way for us to piggyback on that? Would they go into a contract with the city to piggyback on that existing tower instead of us putting the new one up?
That suggestion has been expressed to the chiefs and some of their staff who are working on this project.
Okay,
The answer I've gotten, because I'm on the same page as you are, 100%, that was not possible. And I didn't get, frankly, an objective response on that, and if we would like one, I think there's still some time before we go through as per the expenditure policy and how that project's actually gonna come forward, to be asking some of these questions.
I would imagine that would be a liability concern on their standpoint if our equipment needed repair, but they wouldn't allow access or they had to do it, but.
There's a height,
Something like that.
height is a big factor in this,
Yeah.
but thankfully, the hospital, which has some height, existing height stuff going on, as well as the county, has agreed to help us along in this discussion. So it's not just in a vacuum, the departments are going forth with it, there's actually because the city of Marshfield and the county partnered on their towers,
Well,
and
obviously,
you read
they're-
about that in the paper, but
they're gonna benefit
it
from
didn't
too.
work out for them, but for us, if the sheriff's department or anybody else has needs related to radio communications, we're right there with them. I mean, this is a cost that we can probably share. So the hospital has agreed to help with some of the hospital challenges with a repeater, but as to the tower, I think, and maybe Tim can help chime in too, is we're a few steps yet from committing that, but yeah, reality is I think we have to do something is the reality. It's just a matter of how we get there is probably still to be determined, I would say. Is safe to
Right,
say.
yeah, and this is just another to kind of deposit and accumulate those funds to do it, but obviously we're ways away from making a final decision. Obviously, then that would be something that, once we kind of decide what we want to do, it'll come back through this.
When they say dead zones, do they give you a specific area that is a dead zone to them, for example?
Walmart, hospital basement,
Some places in the mills, they said,
Mhm.
were dead zones.
And I'd be interested in knowing how one tower fixes that, but.
right, especially on the west side, right? You'd think if they're on the east side and the southeast side,
Right.
but yeah, they've got some modeling
Okay.
that they've shared.
All
too.
right.
And wasn't there some, where there at the water tower, some like coning or?
Oh, yeah, right, yeah, that's right, that was.
I think it was the shape of the tower,
Yep.
they tried to put, for the shape of the, structure itself, they tried to put it on top of the water tower.
Right.
Basically, the water tower casts a shadow that
Yes.
basically underneath it for however many hundreds of
Yeah.
feet beyond it, you get
Right.
nothing whatsoever.
Right, because of the fact that.
The line of sight.
The energy of the signal is absorbed by the tower in
Yep,
effect.
yep, the line of sight to the signal is just non-existent in some places.
Okay. All right. Did anyone else have anything else they wanted to discuss that they've seen? Now, our next step then is, will you have any last minute things coming in from the state about tax and revenues and so on?
Well, I think we have pretty much, I'm getting for our final expenditure straight number, I haven't received that, but I'm fairly confident that I know what that's gonna be, because I kind of track it all year long.
Because we had that $500 we did earlier this year.
Yes, well, that was like the rounding thing.
Uh-huh.
The only, I think we have basically all the state numbers that we need. The only thing obviously that we don't have is state school tax credit, but we don't get that till December.
Okay.
So that won't be until we finally, so we won't know exactly what our total net tax rate will be until we get that number in December. But basically, the next step would be is probably the public hearing is on November 18th. The regular council meeting. We always have a finance committee meeting before that
Prior to
to
that.
adopt the resolution, adopting the levy
Yep.
and approving the budget. And basically, my anticipation is that at that meeting, we'll bring back some of the items that you brought up with the league dues, or not the league dues, but the amounts put in for conferences under the common council budget. And then obviously the cleanup, the $6,000 for neighborhood cleanup, and with a recommendation for that. And then assuming that there's no other changes or whatever, then at that point we'll make a recommendation to adopt the budget and forward it to the public hearing.
We're gonna
Okay.
block Chad here, I don't know when he's not.
Oh,
Did he have some items or something,
That-
Chad?
What I brought up
That-
that night.
That was it. 'cause
Yeah, I had some
I thought he
questions
said
for-
the other night after the meeting or
Yeah.
something about having a
You want-
special meeting or something, I thought he said.
okay.
So if that was the item, that's,
And when he called my house yesterday, I happened to be out running some errands, so we missed one another. I think one thing that may come up for discussion is the rental property inspection program. Okay, because you've added a full, half-time to full-time position. Okay, have you presented that to the landlord association?
No, not since then. In fact, we've been somewhat put on notice that we may have a vacancy in that department. That will set in motion yet some maybe changes to the timeline to that, depending on how quickly we can refill the position.
Okay,
So there's some, and it was directly related to that position. And we're putting notice in effectively as soon as their municipality passes their budget, from what we understand. So that leaves us with somewhat of a hole. But no, the landlord association has not been presented, because even before that, I think the council needs to have a full-on discussion about how we're going to do this program, and if, you know, to what
Right.
extent we do it, before we take it too far. I don't wanna get out in front of something that may or may not, you know, truly exist, right? So having that full dialogue with the council will be important.
okay.
And I think from what Adam said, I mean, it's partially gonna be dependent upon if we fill that position as a full-time position, or if it's part-time like it is today, and then when that person would be on board, and if they have qualified, I mean, so there's a complexities there, but I would say we're still on that midsummer at the soonest before we even discuss
Okay.
something like that.
And has Ray had any input onto this item?
You know, Ray's a trooper. Ray says that he, you know, and based on our, we met this morning actually on a code enforcement app that we're rolling out. You know, it's all a matter of what we give him, and he's gonna go do it.
Okay,
So he recognizes the need. I don't wanna speak for him fully, but I think
Right.
he sees the ground and the world a little bit different than all of us when he's going in, and, or the other inspectors too, residential inspectors as
Yeah.
well.
okay, there's, we've, in the seventh ward, there's been a problem. I'll just leave it at that for a period of time, and
Yeah.
different aldermen have had to address it. I think the
It's
addition of
rearing its ugly
Ray,
head probably.
I think the addition of Ray has been a big help.
Oh, 100%,
Doing things.
100%. even just the amount of resolved cases and then even going a step beyond and resolving them in person, I think has been critical. And that could never have happened if the additional hours were not given to that position. So I think that is an accomplishment bar none from the council's support of that last year.
Okay, and one other item, Mayor, will be the mayor's participation in local government senior executive program. Okay, $11,900 for the program.
What was, I don't have the full budget in front of me.
You, it's, carryover funds of 13 and, 5,900 from last year and 5,000 this year. So I take it that we had monies left over in 13.
Correct, yeah,
And you
based on our
budgeted-
previous conversation, it was never the intention to fully fund that in any
Correct.
one fiscal year.
Right.
And I still have not, committed to applying to that particular program. Depending on how it's funded and what's funded, within that, obviously, I still have to apply and get accepted into any program, if it's
Correct.
if it's that, or if it's any other.
And that's the program done through Harvard, correct?
The one that's outlined in there, correct.
Okay,
But it doesn't have to be that, and
okay.
and I haven't, quite frankly, that has some time commitments to it that I need to make sure I can fulfill
Right.
duties here as well as going through the course, because if one can't do one side of it, then there's no reason to participate.
Okay. And outside of Harvard, is it done any other place?
Not that particular
That-
one, but there's a
okay.
course the University of Minnesota is putting on right now for senior executives as well. They just announced it.
Okay.
I know I got a fly, they get the flyers in the mail
Yeah.
sort of thing. That's the only one that I've actually looked for, but I haven't spent any time looking.
Okay.
That was one that Mayor Green Bay had said that he attended and was very well. He found that it was very beneficial, and so that's where okay, work towards something. If it's that, not that, it might be something else.
And how do you see that as benefiting the city?
Sure. Well, that particular program, I haven't seen their 2015
Okay.
syllabus yet. Their 2014 syllabus covered a couple of areas. One was negotiations, recognizing that public sector in many states, and our state too, we still have the negotiation of collective bargaining rights with the two units, police and fire. That was the one component. Public finance was also another component to it. So we've looked at activity-based budgeting. The surprising thing, to me, that was somewhat assuring was the performance-based work that we've done around Lean Six Sigma. And some of these executive programs, that's a core part of it. And I'm like, well, we're a step ahead because I already have the competency that we've provided all of our management team with through Midstate. So, there may not be application in all of that. So that's why I still need to make sure we evaluate it and all of that.
All right. And then when they put on a program like this, would they make any grants or
Yes.
something
In fact, that's
available
why
to
not
the
100%
individual?
was not funded. Correct.
Okay,
Correct. And there's actually, not only did they sponsor scholarship folks, but there's also entities that will. The
okay,
City County Managers Association, the ICMA, does do scholarshiping as well. So if it's not them, there's other sources of match out there.
okay. I guess I bring it up, Mayor,
Mhm.
simply a concern.
Sure.
I've not seen something like this before
Mhm.
in any other budgets.
Yep.
And I know I've been asked about it by some others, so
Sure.
I think if we can
Fairly, yeah.
identify the purpose and the reason for it,
Fair
it's
enough.
helpful.
Yep.
And,
I will, as I communicated last time, before anything is applied for, I want to be as transparent about it as possible. One, if it's gonna, especially if it's gonna take them away from day-to-day operations, that's gonna be
Right.
something I want to make sure is communicated as well.
okay. All righty. Well, I think we're complete on that. We'll, let's see, are you ready? Are you ready for a motion then that, or do you have anything more you'd like to do with this before?
I think we'll make the motion because we gotta bring back those couple changes,
Yep.
so we might as well just, I'll update this thing,
Okay,
and then we'll make and before the council, because all the aldermen will get this reconciliation, so they know the
Yep.
changes that have
We
been
can
made.
find out when Chad's
And
gonna
then-
be back.
Right, and then before council, we'll have that, where we do the resolution, but
Yep.
before that, we'll update you on those two items that you requested, and then we'll officially approve the budget,
okay.
and then a resolution.
I just realized something I didn't think to ask. Do you have budgeting outlined for 2015? Not budgeting, but borrowing.
Oh, for 2000, yeah, the $1 million that I
Okay,
referenced to earlier,
yeah,
for
okay,
the, yep.
okay, just want to be sure
Mhm.
about that. I was reading through the different bondings that were there, and I think there's like 13 total, so, okay. Well, then I'd make a motion to approve the 2015 budget as presented with corrections and updates as may be coming.
Second?
Motion made and second to approve the 2015 budget as presented with any updates that may occur between now and council night. Is there any other discussion, questions, concerns? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, and then we have our item number 7 is the beverage operator license applications. And we do have a number of applications, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 applications. And there is one concern, one person needs to speak with the city clerk to complete the form, and they have an outstanding bill that they have to bring up to the clerk and talk with that and square that away. So I would move to approve the beverage operator license applications as presented with the one exception.
Second?
Okay, motion's made second to approve the beverage operator license application. Any other questions, comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. Last item is audit of the bills. And there was one in here, I did mark it. It just kind of caught my eye as I was reading through them. I did not mark it. Yes, a question about, it's on page 2.
Okay.
And it's towards the bottom, Cravings Coffee Shop grant funds. I wondered if you might be able to tell us a little bit about that one. What was occurring there?
Funds, I guess it's. Let's see here, let me just pull that just to. Okay. 57. Sorry. Oh, yep, okay. That's part of our liquor license. We have that grant program when someone has to pay $10,000 for one of those liquor licenses, that if they make improvements to their property, that we use that money to reimburse them for those improvements.
Okay.
And that's what that is that, because they got that wine, I do believe,
Yeah.
Cravings. And so they had to purchase a $10,000 license,
Right,
but then they were able through the city's grant program to take that, make $10,000 of improvements, and that's that payment back to them.
okay.
So it's on, so they pay the 10,000, they do the upgrades, and then they submit the receipts to us, and then we reimburse them.
Okay.
So that's what that is.
Golly.
Have a good night, everybody.
Good night, everybody. And down there on page 14.
Okay.
57180, John Shire.
That's our health insurance. I'm guessing that might have been for a presentation that he gave as part of our wellness or
Okay.
presentation, but that's.
So we had a person in,
Well, we have different presentations for wellness,
right?
or let me just check to make sure exactly what that's for. I mean, it's coming out of our health insurance fund.
Okay,
And I'm guessing that's what, presentation of Live Long, that was part of our wellness
all right.
program today.
Terry, any questions?
No.
Okay, that item 8, we audited the bills. Item 9 is adjournment. I make a motion to adjourn at 6:50 PM.
I second that.
Motion made, seconded to adjourn at 6:50 PM. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.